It's just a kiss with my ex. Relax, my wife said as she tried to hide a bottle of collectible wine in her bag. I replied, all right. But it wasn't all right, not even close. My name is Pierce Marin, and I'm 39 years old with the kind of face that screams harmless IT guy, which until recently was exactly what I was, harmless. The kind of husband who fixed the Wi-Fi, programmed the smart home system, and pretended not to notice when my wife Kiera came home smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. The bottle she was hiding was a 1998 Chateau Margaux worth about $3,000. I knew because I'd bought it for our 10th wedding anniversary 2 years ago. We were supposed to open it together when Nina graduated high school. Nina's our daughter, 13, sharp as a tack, and unfortunately starting to notice that Mom's book club meets at some pretty weird hours. Where are you going with that? I asked, nodding toward her oversized purse. Kiera's laugh was the kind of sound that could cut glass. It's for the client tasting tomorrow. Darren wants to showcase some premium bottles for his investors. Darren Halloway, her ex-boyfriend from college. The same Darren who'd suddenly reappeared in our lives 6 months ago when Kiera started her wine brokerage business. Tall, tan, and rich enough to make my software consulting income look like pocket change. He ran some luxury wine import company and had convinced Kiera to handle his local distribution. Funny, I said, keeping my voice light. I thought you said the tasting was next week. Plans changed. She was already heading for the door, heels clicking on our hardwood floors like a countdown timer. Don't wait up. The front door slammed, leaving me alone with the hum of our smart home system and the distinct feeling that my marriage was circling the drain. I walked to my home office, really just the converted garage where I kept my computers and automation equipment. The walls were lined with monitors showing feeds from our security cameras, smart lock status, and environmental controls. Most people thought it was overkill for a suburban house in Portland, but I liked having information. Information was power, and lately I'd been feeling pretty powerless. My phone buzzed with a text from Riley, my best friend and the only person who knew how bad things had gotten. Beer? You look like you need it. Riley worked private security for some tech companies downtown. Former military, built like a linebacker, and possessed of the kind of loyalty that was getting harder to find these days. He'd been warning me about Kiera for months, but I'd been too stubborn to listen. Rain check, I typed back. Nina's got homework. That wasn't entirely true. Nina was upstairs video chatting with friends, but I needed to think. The wine bottle wasn't the first thing that had gone missing. Over the past few weeks, I'd noticed gaps in our collection. Always the expensive stuff. Always bottles that Kiera claimed were for business. I pulled up our home security footage from earlier that day. Kiera in the wine cellar, carefully selecting bottles and checking labels. She'd thought she was being sneaky, but every room in our house had cameras. Occupational hazard of being married to someone who automated everything. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The timestamp showed she'd been down there for 20 minutes, much longer than it would take to grab one bottle. I fast-forwarded through the footage and counted at least 6 bottles going into various bags and boxes. All premium stuff, all worth serious money. My laptop chimed with an email notification. Julia Brennan, Kiera's best friend and enabler extraordinaire. The subject line read, Tomorrow's plan. I shouldn't have opened it. Invasion of privacy and all that. But when your wife is stealing your anniversary wine to impress her ex-boyfriend, privacy becomes a luxury you can't afford. Kate, make sure you have the Bordeaux collection ready. D says his investors are particularly interested in the 98 Margaux. Also, confirm the motel reservation for after the tasting. Room 237 at the Riverside Inn. You know the drill. J. My hands stopped moving over the keyboard. Motel reservation. The drill. Suddenly, Kiera's late nights and mysterious client meetings started making a lot more sense. The expensive lingerie she claimed was for confidence. The new perfume. The way she'd started working out again and buying clothes that cost more than my monthly car payment. I sat back in my chair and stared at the email. Part of me wanted to delete it, pretend I'd never seen it, and go back to being the oblivious husband who fixed the internet and didn't ask questions. But a bigger part, a part that was getting stronger by the minute, wanted to know exactly how far this rabbit hole went. I forwarded the email to a secure folder and started digging. Kiera's phone was synced to our family cloud account, which meant I had access to her photos, texts, and location history. I'd set it up that way years ago for convenience and never bothered changing it. Lucky me. The photos were educational. Kiera and Darren at restaurants I couldn't afford. Kiera and Darren at wine tastings in Seattle, San Francisco, and Napa Valley. Kiera and Darren looking very comfortable together in what was definitely not a business relationship. The texts were worse. Months of planning, scheming, and casual cruelty. Darren complaining about his wife Jessa, Kiera complaining about me, both of them treating our marriages like inconvenient obstacles to their grand romance. Pierce is so boring, one message read. All he cares about is his computers and his little gadgets. Sometimes I wonder what I ever saw in him. Another. At least your husband has money. Mine thinks a romantic evening is setting up a new smart thermostat. I kept reading, each message like a small punch to the gut. They'd been planning this for months. The wine business was just a cover. They were using my collection, my house, and my trust to fund their affair. But the real kicker came in a message from 3 days ago. D. The insurance on Pierce's wine collection is worth almost $200K. If something happened to it, we could start fresh somewhere else. Just a thought. K. I leaned back in my chair and laughed. Actually laughed. Here I was, feeling sorry for myself about a cheating wife, and she was planning to rob me blind in the process. That's when I heard the car pull into our driveway. I quickly closed all the windows on my computer and walked to the front door. Through the security camera feed on my phone, I could see a black SUV parked behind my Honda. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a woman I recognized from Darren's social media photos. Jessa Halloway, Darren's wife. Tall, blonde, and walking toward my front door with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested she wasn't here to sell Girl Scout cookies. I opened the door before she could knock. "You're Pierce," she said. It wasn't a question. "Guilty as charged." She looked me up and down, taking in my jeans and Portland Timbers t-shirt. "You're not what I expected. Sorry to disappoint." "Oh, you're not disappointing at all." She smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "In fact, you might be exactly what I need. We should talk." "About what?" "About what our spouses are doing tomorrow night at the Riverside Inn." She reached into her purse and pulled out a motel room key. "Room 237, to be specific. I thought you might want to see for yourself." I stared at the key in her hand. It was small, plastic, and represented a choice I couldn't take back once I made it. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired of being played for a fool," she said, "and because I think you might be too. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I took the key. It was warm from her hand and felt heavier than it should have. "What did you have in mind?" Her smile turned predatory. "Bring your camera, and maybe some of those tech skills I keep hearing about. Tomorrow night we're going to give them a show they'll never forget." The Riverside Inn was the kind of place that charged by the hour and didn't ask questions. Peeling paint, flickering neon signs, and the lingering smell of industrial disinfectant trying to mask decades of questionable decisions. I sat in Jessa's SUV, camera equipment in my lap, wondering how my life had taken such a sharp left turn. 24 hours ago, I'd been a suburban dad with a boring job and a marriage I thought was just going through a rough patch. Now I was conducting surveillance on my cheating wife like some discount private investigator. "They're here," Jessa said, pointing to a familiar silver BMW pulling into the parking lot. Kiera stepped out first, looking around nervously before grabbing a large bag from the trunk. Even from 50 yards away, I could see the outline of wine bottles through the canvas. Darren emerged from the driver's side, tall and confident in his expensive suit, carrying what looked like a briefcase. "What's in the case?" I asked. "Probably cash," Jessa replied. "Darren's been skimming from his import business for months. I've seen the books." "You've seen his books?" She gave me a look that suggested I was being naive. "Pierce, honey, I've been married to that man for 8 years. I know where every penny goes, or in this case, where it's been going." We watched them disappear into room 237. I checked my camera settings one more time. High resolution, good low-light performance, and enough memory to record whatever was about to happen. "How long do we wait?" I asked. "We'll give them 10 minutes to get comfortable. Then we move." Jessa was nothing like what I'd expected from Darren's social media posts. Those photos showed a typical trophy wife, beautiful, well-dressed, and apparently content to look decorative at charity events. The woman sitting next to me was sharp, calculating, and angrier than a wet cat. "How long have you known?" I asked. "About the affair? 3 months. About the wine scam? 2 weeks. About tonight? Yesterday, when I followed him to the motel to scout the location." She checked her watch. "Your wife's not as careful with her planning as she thinks." "Wine scam?" "Oh, you don't know the best part yet." Jessa's laugh was bitter. "They're not just having an affair, they're running a con. Darren's been buying cheap wine, rebottling it with expensive labels, and selling it to his investors as premium stock. Your wife's been providing the authentic bottles for him to copy?" The pieces started falling into place, the missing bottles from our collection, Kiera's sudden expertise in wine authentication, the mysterious client meetings that always seem to involve our most expensive vintages. So they're stealing my wine to create fake bottles? Bingo, and splitting the profits. I estimate they've made about $50,000 in the past 3 months alone. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not just betrayal that I'd already processed. This was something else. A kind of clinical anger that made me want to document every detail of their operation before I destroyed it. Time to go, Jessa said. We approached room 237 carefully. The curtains were drawn, but there was a gap near the window frame that gave us a clear view inside. I raised my camera and started recording. What I saw through the viewfinder was worse than I'd imagined. Kiera and Darren weren't just having an affair, they were conducting business. The motel room had been converted into a temporary office, with bottles of wine arranged on the dresser, paperwork spread across the bed, and stacks of cash being counted and divided. The Chateau Margaux copies are moving faster than expected, Kiera was saying. We should be able to clear another 20 bottles this month. Darren nodded, making notes in a ledger. Good. My investors are getting suspicious about the authentication certificates. We need to move the operation offshore soon. What about Pierce? What about him? Darren's voice carried the kind of casual contempt that made my finger tighten on the camera's record button. Your husband's a tech nerd who thinks a good evening is programming his smart doorbell. He'll never figure it out. Kiera laughed. You should see him trying to be romantic. Last week he surprised me with a new wine storage app. An app, Darren. Like I'm supposed to be impressed by software. Well, his wine collection is impressive, even if he is boring as hell. Not for much longer, Kiera said, holding up a document. I've been documenting his erratic behavior for the insurance claim. Late nights, paranoid accusations, obsessive monitoring of our finances. When I file for divorce, I'll claim he's been drinking heavily and destroying the collection in fits of rage. I kept recording, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. They'd planned everything. The affair, the theft, the insurance fraud, and my complete destruction. All while I'd been worried about fixing our marriage. The insurance payout is $200,000, Kiera continued. Split that with the money we've made from the copies, and we can start fresh in California. Darren's got connections in Napa Valley. What about my wife? Darren asked. What about her? She's got her own money. She'll be fine. That's when Jessa decided she'd heard enough. She walked straight to the motel room door and knocked. Hard. Room service, she called out in a cheerful voice. I kept filming as panic spread across their faces. Kiera started shoving papers into her bag while Darren tried to hide the cash. But they couldn't hide the bottles, the ledger, or the guilty expressions that made them look like teenagers caught sneaking out. Darren opened the door, and his face went pale when he saw his wife standing there with a smile that could freeze lava. Hello, darling, Jessa said. Don't mind me. I just wanted to see what a $50,000 affair looks like. Jessa, I can explain. Oh, I'm sure you can. But first, I think you should meet my friend Pierce. He's been very interested in your business model. I stepped into view, camera still rolling, and watched my wife's world collapse in real time. Pierce? Kiera's voice was small, uncertain. What are you doing here? Documenting, I said. Turns out I'm pretty good at it. Who knew? Darren tried to close the door, but Jessa was faster. She pushed past him into the room, surveying the evidence with professional interest. Let's see, she said, picking up the ledger. Fraudulent wine sales, insurance fraud, theft of marital property, and adultery. Did I miss anything? This isn't what it looks like, Kiera said. I laughed. Actually laughed. Really? Because it looks like you've been stealing my wine collection to fund your affair while planning to frame me for insurance fraud. Did I get that right? The silence that followed was broken by the sound of another car pulling into the parking lot. Through the window, I could see a man in an expensive suit getting out of a white sedan. Expecting someone? Jessa asked. Darren's face went from pale to green. That's Vincent Carrera. He's one of my biggest investors. The one buying your fake Bordeaux? I asked. How did you know about that? I've been reading your emails, genius, all of them. Amazing what you can learn when you actually pay attention. Vincent Carrera knocked on the door, and the sound echoed through the room like a judge's gavel. Mr. Halloway, we need to discuss some discrepancies in your inventory reports. Darren looked at Kiera, who looked at Jessa, who looked at me. I kept filming, capturing every moment of their growing panic. This should be interesting, I said. Vincent Carrera was not the kind of man you kept waiting. Even through the motel room door, his presence filled the space like expensive cologne mixed with barely contained violence. Darren's hand shook as he tried to organize the scattered papers on the bed. "Open the door," Carrera called out. "Now." Jessa smiled at her husband. "Go ahead, darling. Don't keep your business partner waiting." I kept my camera rolling as Darren opened the door. Carrera stepped inside, took one look at the wine bottles, cash, and paperwork, and his expression hardened into something that belonged in a courtroom. "Mr. Halloway," he said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made everyone in the room stand straighter, "would you care to explain why you're conducting business in a motel room?" "Vincent, I can explain. I'm sure you can. But first, let me introduce myself to your associates." Carrera's gaze swept over Kiera, Jessa, and me. "I'm Vincent Carrera, CEO of Carrera Wine Investments. We've been doing business with Mr. Halloway for the past year, purchasing premium wines for our collector clients." He picked up one of the bottles from the dresser, a 1995 Chateau d'Yquem that I recognized from my own collection. "Interesting," he continued. "This particular bottle was sold to one of our clients last month. Yet here it is again. Mr. Halloway, do you have multiple bottles of this vintage?" Darren's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Kiera tried to step forward, but Jessa blocked her path with a subtle shift of her body. "There's been a misunderstanding," Kiera said. "We're just conducting a routine authentication. And you are?" Carrera's attention turned to her like a spotlight. "Kiera Marin. I run Pacific Wine Brokerage. I've been helping Mr. Halloway with his inventory management." "I see. And the cash?" The stacks of bills were still scattered across the bed, impossible to ignore or explain away. Kiera's face flushed red as she struggled for an answer. "Payment for services," she finally said. "In cash? How unusual." Carrera pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. "Mr. Halloway, I think we need to have a serious conversation about our business relationship. Privately." That's when I decided to make my presence known. "Actually," I said, stepping forward with my camera, "I think this conversation should be very public. Mr. Carrera, you might be interested to know that your business partner has been selling you counterfeit wine for months." Carrera's eyebrows rose. "And you are?" "Pierce Marin, Kiera's husband, and the owner of the wine collection they've been using to create their fakes." I handed him my camera, video still playing on the small screen. "Everything you need to know is right there. Audio, video, and documentation of their entire operation." Carrera watched the footage, his expression growing darker with each passing second. When it finished, he looked up at Darren with the kind of smile that made loan sharks nervous. "Mr. Halloway, you've just cost me approximately $2 million in client relationships. I hope whatever you made from this little scheme was worth it." "Vincent, please, save it." Carrera pocketed his phone. "You'll be hearing from my lawyers, all of you." He walked out, leaving behind a silence that felt like the aftermath of an explosion. Jessa was the first to speak. "Well, that was fun. Darren, honey, I think it's time we discussed our divorce settlement." "Jessa, wait. No waiting. I've already filed the papers. They'll be served tomorrow morning, along with a restraining order keeping you away from our house and assets." She turned to me. "Pierce, it's been a pleasure working with you. I think our spouses deserve each other." She left, her heels clicking across the parking lot like a countdown timer. Darren stared after her, then at the scattered evidence of his ruined life, then at me. "Oh, you have no idea what you've done," he said. "Sure I do," I replied. "I've documented the complete destruction of your business, your marriage, and your reputation, all in high definition. This isn't over. Actually, it is. But don't worry. I've got plenty more footage where that came from." I walked out, leaving Kiera and Darren to clean up the wreckage of their grand plan. The night air felt cold against my skin, but I was surprised to find that I didn't feel cold inside. Instead, there was something warm and satisfying growing in my chest, something that felt suspiciously like justice. My phone buzzed with a text from Riley. "How'd it go?" "Better than expected," I typed back. "Want to grab that beer now?" "Hell yes. I'll meet you at Murphy's." I drove home first to check on Nina and upload the video files to multiple cloud storage accounts. No way was I letting this evidence disappear. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Kiera's car wasn't there yet, probably still at the motel, trying to figure out how to spin this disaster into something resembling innocence. Nina was in her room, homework spread across her desk, headphones on. I knocked on her door frame. "How's the algebra coming?" She pulled off her headphones. "Done. Dad, is everything okay? You look different." "Different how?" "I don't know. Less worried, maybe? You've seemed really stressed lately." "Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. Just working through some things with your mom. Nothing for you to worry about. Are you guys getting divorced? The question hit me like a cold slap. Why would you ask that? Because Mom's never home anymore, and when she is, you guys barely talk. Plus, Jessica's parents got divorced last year, and it started exactly like this. I sat on the edge of her bed, trying to figure out how to answer. Nina deserved honesty, but she also deserved to be a kid for a little while longer. Your mom and I are having some problems, I said finally. But whatever happens, you're the most important thing in both our lives. That won't change. She nodded, accepting the non-answer with the wisdom of a teenager who'd learned not to push too hard when adults were being evasive. I love you, Dad. Love you too, kiddo. I left her to finish her homework and headed to my office to secure the video files. As I was setting up the uploads, my computer chimed with a new email, Julia Brennan again. This time, the subject line read, Emergency. Pierce, Kiera called me crying. She says you've been following her and taking pictures. This is harassment, and I think you should know that we're considering legal action. Whatever you think you saw tonight, you're wrong. Kiera loves you and would never do anything to hurt your family. Call off your investigation before you do something you'll regret. Julia. I stared at the email for a long moment, then started typing my response. Julia, thanks for your concern, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. I haven't been investigating anything. I've been documenting it. There's a difference. As for legal action, I'd be very careful about threatening someone who has video evidence of your friend committing fraud. But hey, if you want to involve lawyers, I'm sure they'd be very interested in seeing my footage. Have a great evening. Pierce. I hit send and immediately felt better. Amazing how much clearer everything became once you stopped pretending not to see what was right in front of you. My phone rang. Kiera. Pierce, we need to talk. Do we? I thought we just did. At the motel, with witnesses. That wasn't what it looked like. Really? What was it then? Silence. Then, I'm coming home. We can work this out. Actually, I don't think we can. But you're welcome to try. I hung up and activated the security system. Every door, every window, every possible entry point was now monitored and recorded. If Kiera wanted to come home and explain herself, she was welcome to do it on camera. 30 minutes later, I was at Murphy's Pub, sitting across from Riley with a beer in my hand and a story to tell. The place was mostly empty, just a few regulars watching sports highlights and complaining about their jobs. So, let me get this straight, Riley said after I'd finished explaining the evening's events. Your wife has been stealing your wine collection to help her ex-boyfriend run a counterfeiting operation, and they were planning to frame you for insurance fraud? That's the short version, yeah. And you caught them red-handed with the help of the boyfriend's wife? Jessa, yeah, she's intense. Riley shook his head. Man, I knew Kiera was trouble, but this is next-level stuff. What's your next move? Honestly, I'm not sure. Part of me wants to call the cops, but part of me thinks there might be a more creative solution. Creative how? Well, they've been planning to humiliate me publicly with their divorce and fraud claims. Maybe it's time to return the favor. Riley grinned. Now you're talking. What did you have in mind? There's a wine festival next weekend, big social event. All the local wine industry people will be there. Kiera's supposed to have a booth representing her brokerage business. And I think it would be a shame if someone accidentally played the wrong video on the event's big screens. Riley's grin widened. You're starting to think like a security professional? I like it. Think you could help me figure out the technical side? Brother, I'd be insulted if you didn't ask. We spent the next hour planning what Riley called Operation Public Service Announcement. By the time I got home, Kiera's car was in the driveway, and the lights were on in our bedroom. Time for round 2. Kiera was waiting for me in the kitchen, still wearing the expensive dress she'd put on for her motel meeting with Darren. She'd been crying. Her makeup was smeared, and her usually perfect hair looked like she'd been running her hands through it. Pierce, please, let me explain. I grabbed a bottle of water from the refrigerator and leaned against the counter. I'm listening. What you saw tonight. It's not what you think. What I think is that you've been having an affair with your ex-boyfriend while stealing my wine collection to fund a counterfeiting operation. Am I wrong? She flinched like I'd slapped her. It's more complicated than that. How so? Darren and I, we have history. When he came back into my life, old feelings resurfaced. But it was never supposed to go this far. Which part? The affair or the fraud? The wine business is legitimate. We were just cutting corners on authentication to speed up sales. I almost laughed. Cutting corners? Kiera, you were selling fake bottles for thousands of dollars each. That's not cutting corners. That's theft. We were going to pay everything back once the business took off. With money you stole from insurance fraud. Her face crumpled. How did you find out about that? I've been finding out about a lot of things lately. Amazing what you discover when you actually pay attention. She moved closer, reaching for my hand. Pierce, I know I've made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can start over. I pulled my hand away. No, we can't. Why not? Because you called me boring. Because you laughed about my attempts to be romantic. Because you planned to destroy my reputation and steal my money. Because you never loved me. You just settled for me. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Kiera opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. We both knew there was no point in lying anymore. What do you want? She asked finally. I want you to leave. Tonight. Go stay with Julia or Darren or whoever will have you. But I want you out of this house. You can't kick me out. I live here too. Actually, I can. This house is in my name, bought with money I earned before we got married. Check the deed if you don't believe me. Her face went white. Pierce, please. Leave, Kiera, before I change my mind about calling the police. She stared at me for a long moment, looking for some sign that I was bluffing. When she didn't find it, she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. This isn't over, she said. Yes, it is. After she left, I activated the smart locks and changed all the access codes. Then I sat in my office and started planning for the wine festival. The Pacific Northwest Wine Festival was the biggest industry event of the year. 3 days of tastings, seminars, and networking in downtown Portland's convention center. Kiera had been excited about it for months, her chance to establish Pacific Wine Brokerage as a serious player in the local market. Riley arrived the next morning with a duffel bag full of equipment and a grin that suggested he'd been looking forward to this as much as I had. Wireless video transmitters, he explained, pulling devices from his bag. Completely untraceable, range of about 500 yards, and compatible with most modern projection systems. How do you know about the convention center's setup? I did security for a tech conference there last year. Their AV system is top-notch, but not particularly secure. Someone with the right equipment could easily override their video feeds. Someone like you? Someone exactly like me. We spent the morning testing the equipment and editing the motel footage into a highlight reel that would make maximum impact in minimum time. 3 minutes of Kiera and Darren discussing their fraud, their affair, and their plans to destroy me. Clean audio, clear video, and absolutely devastating. When do you want to deploy this? Riley asked. Saturday afternoon. Kiera's presentation is scheduled for 2 o'clock. She'll be on the main stage talking about ethical wine brokerage and authentic vintage verification. Riley snorted. The irony is beautiful. Isn't it? My phone buzzed with a text from Jessa. Thought you should know. Darren's been fired from his import company. Carrera made some calls. Also, I may have mentioned your video to a few people in the wine industry. Hope you don't mind. I showed the message to Riley. Looks like word is already spreading. Good. By the time we're done, everyone in the Pacific Northwest will know what your wife and her boyfriend have been up to. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Kiera tried calling several times, but I let the calls go to voicemail. Her messages grew increasingly desperate as word of Darren's firing spread through the wine community. Pierce, please call me back. People are saying terrible things about my business. I need to explain what really happened. Pierce, this is getting out of hand. Darren says you're trying to destroy us both. That's not who you are. Pierce, please, I'm begging you. If you ever loved me, call me back. I deleted each message without responding. She was right about one thing. Destroying people wasn't who I used to be, but people change. Sometimes they have to. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly. Typical Portland weather that matched my mood perfectly. Riley and I arrived at the convention center early, posing as vendors, setting up equipment for a fictional tech company. Security waved us through without a second glance. Amazing how easy it is to get into these places when you look like you belong, Riley muttered as we located the main presentation theater. The AV control booth was locked, but Riley made short work of the electronic lock with a device that looked like a garage door opener. Where did you get that? I asked. Military surplus. Don't ask. Inside the booth, Riley went to work connecting his transmitters to the projection system. The setup was elegant in its simplicity. When activated, his devices would override whatever was being displayed and broadcast our video instead. How long will it take them to shut it down? I asked. Depends on how fast their tech people are. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe 3 minutes. Long enough to get your point across. We finished the installation and left the convention center, driving to a coffee shop across the street where we could monitor the situation. At 1:45, I watched through the window as Kiera arrived in her BMW, looking nervous but determined. "You sure about this?" Riley asked. I thought about the past week. The lies, the theft, the casual cruelty of their conversations about me, the way they'd planned to destroy my life without a second thought. "I'm sure." At exactly 2:00 p.m., Kiera took the stage. She looked beautiful, professional, and completely confident as she began her presentation on ethical business practices in wine brokerage. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "The foundation of our industry," she was saying, "is trust. Clients need to know that when they purchase a premium vintage, they're getting exactly what they paid for." Riley's finger hovered over the activation button. "Ready? Do it." The main screen flickered once, then went black. For a moment, there was confused murmuring from the audience. Then the video started playing. Kiera's voice filled the theater, crystal clear through the sound system. "The Chateau Margaux copies are moving faster than expected. We should be able to clear another 20 bottles this month." The audience fell silent. On stage, Kiera's face went white as she realized what was happening. She tried to continue her presentation, but her voice was drowned out by the audio from the motel room. Darren's voice. "Your husband's a tech nerd who thinks a good evening is programming his smart doorbell. He'll never figure it out." Kiera on screen. "You should see him trying to be romantic. Last week he surprised me with a new wine storage app. An app, Darren. Like I'm supposed to be impressed by software." The theater erupted. People were pulling out phones, recording the video of the video. Kiera tried to leave the stage, but the exit was blocked by festival organizers who wanted answers. The video continued for another 2 minutes, documenting every detail of their fraud and affair. By the time it ended, Kiera was surrounded by angry investors, festival officials, and what looked like a reporter from the local wine magazine. Riley and I watched from across the street as security escorted Kiera from the building. Her business was finished. Her reputation was destroyed. Her carefully planned future with Darren had evaporated in less than 3 minutes. "Feel better?" Riley asked. I considered the question. Did I feel better? Vindicated, certainly. Satisfied that justice had been served. But better? That was more complicated. "Ask me tomorrow," I said. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Pierce Marin?" "Speaking." "This is Detective Sarah Sloan, Portland Police. We need to talk." Detective Sloan was waiting for me at the police station, a compact woman in her 40s with the kind of tired eyes that had seen too much human stupidity. She led me to a small interview room that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. "Mr. Marin, I'm investigating complaints of harassment and cybercrime filed by Kiera Marin and Darren Halloway. They claim you've been stalking them and illegally recording private conversations." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app. "Do you mind if I record this conversation? For my own protection." She raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." "Detective, everything I recorded was done in public spaces or with the consent of at least one party to the conversation. In Oregon, that makes it completely legal." "What about the wine festival incident?" "What about it? I played a video at a public event. No law against that." "The video contained private conversations. Private conversations about public fraud. I'd argue that makes them matters of public interest." Detective Sloan leaned back in her chair, studying me. "You know, in 20 years of police work, I've seen a lot of cheating spouse cases. Usually the wronged party either falls apart or gets violent. You're doing something different." "I'm documenting." "Why?" "Because violence is temporary, but humiliation is forever, especially when it's recorded in high definition and posted online." She almost smiled. "Mr. Marin, I can't advise you to continue this course of action. But I also can't find any laws you've broken. Yet. Yet? Don't push your luck. These people are desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. Be careful." I left the police station feeling oddly reassured. If the cops couldn't touch me, then Kiera and Darren were running out of options. But Detective Sloan's warning stuck with me. Desperate people do stupid things. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you're clever? Let's see you laugh when I'm done with you. Darren." Apparently, he wasn't taking his public humiliation well. I forwarded the message to Riley and drove home. The house felt different without Kiera. Cleaner somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the air itself. Nina was at her friend's house for the weekend, which meant I had time to think about what came next. The answer came sooner than expected. At 3 a.m., my security system started screaming. Motion detectors, door sensors, and camera alerts all triggered simultaneously. I rolled out of bed and grabbed my laptop, pulling up the live feeds. 3 men in dark clothing were in my driveway, taking baseball bats to my Honda. They worked systematically, smashing windows, denting panels, and slashing tires. One of them spray-painted "snitch" across the windshield in red letters. I grabbed my phone and called 911, then started recording everything through my security cameras. The vandals worked for about 5 minutes before piling into a black pickup truck and driving away, but not before I got a clear shot of the license plate. The police arrived 20 minutes later, followed by Riley, who'd seen my emergency text and driven over in record time. "Well, this escalated quickly," he said, surveying the damage to my car. "Officer Martinez took my statement and copies of the security footage. We'll run the plate, but if this truck is connected to your harassment case, the owners probably aren't going to be cooperative." "What about the property damage?" "File an insurance claim. With this video evidence, you shouldn't have any problems." After the police left, Riley and I sat on my front porch, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. "You know this isn't over," he said. "I know. Darren's not going to stop with property damage. He's lost his job, his wife, his business, and his reputation. He's got nothing left to lose." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you might want to consider a more permanent solution to your Darren problem." I looked at him. "Riley, I'm not going to hurt anyone." "I'm not talking about hurting him. I'm talking about destroying him so completely that he never bothers you again." "How?" Riley grinned. "Leave that to me. But first, we need to figure out where he's staying. Jessa kicked him out, so he's probably at a hotel or crashing with friends." "Why do we need to know where he's staying?" "Because the best revenge is always personal." It took Riley exactly 4 hours to track Darren down. Apparently, private security work came with useful contacts in the hospitality industry. Darren was staying at the Riverside Inn, the same motel where I'd caught him with Kiera. "Poetic justice," Riley said. "Guy's probably in the same room where his life fell apart." We drove to the motel that evening, parking across the street with a clear view of room 237. Sure enough, Darren's BMW was parked outside, looking as battered as my Honda after the morning's vandalism. "What's the plan?" I asked. "Simple. We're going to give Mr. Halloway a taste of his own medicine." Riley pulled a small device from his bag, something that looked like a cross between a garage door opener and a TV remote. "What's that?" "Signal jammer. It'll block his cell phone, Wi-Fi, and any other electronic communications within about 50 yards. "Why would we want to do that?" "Because isolation breeds paranoia, and paranoid people make mistakes." Over the next hour, Riley deployed his electronic warfare arsenal around the motel, signal jammers, motion detectors, and tiny cameras that would monitor Darren's every move. By the time we were finished, room 237 had become a high-tech prison. Now what? Now we wait, and we let Mr. Halloway's imagination do the heavy lifting. The psychological warfare began immediately. Cut off from electronic communication, Darren started pacing his room like a caged animal. Through our cameras, we watched him try his phone repeatedly, growing more frustrated each time he couldn't get a signal. Around midnight, Riley activated the next phase of his plan. Using a small speaker hidden near Darren's window, he began playing audio clips, fragments of Darren's own voice from the motel room recording, mixed with sounds of cars pulling up and footsteps in the hallway. "Vincent, I can explain," Darren's recorded voice whispered through the speaker. "Your husband's a tech nerd. We were going to pay everything back." The effect was immediate and devastating. Darren pressed himself against the window, trying to see who was outside. When he couldn't see anyone, he started checking the locks on his door, then barricading it with furniture. "This is psychological torture," I said. "This is justice," Riley replied. "This guy was planning to destroy your life for money. A little paranoia seems like a fair trade." By 2 a.m., Darren was a wreck. He tried to leave his room 3 times, only to retreat when he heard footsteps or voices in the hallway. Riley's speakers made sure he heard plenty of both. That's when the real fun began. Riley had positioned one of his motion-activated cameras near Darren's car. When Darren finally worked up the courage to make a run for it, the camera triggered a sequence of events that would have made Rube Goldberg proud. First, the car alarm went off. Then every light in the parking lot started flashing in sequence. Finally, Riley's speakers began broadcasting Darren's confession from the motel room at maximum volume, echoing off the buildings and waking everyone within 3 blocks. Darren ran back to his room, slammed the door, and didn't come out again until morning. "Think he got the message?" Riley asked. "I think he got several messages." We packed up our equipment and drove home, leaving Darren to explain to the motel management why his car alarm had been going off all night, and why someone had been broadcasting confessions of wine fraud in their parking lot. By the time I got home, there were 17 missed calls on my phone. 12 from unknown numbers, 3 from Kiera, and 2 from Detective Sloan. I called the detective back first. Mr. Marin, we found the pickup truck that vandalized your car. It was reported stolen yesterday morning. Convenient. Very. But here's the interesting part. It was found abandoned outside Darren Halloway's motel this morning, covered in paint and with the baseball bat still in the back. You think Darren stole it? I think Mr. Halloway is having a very bad week. The motel manager says he was acting erratically all night, and several guests complained about noise coming from his room. Noise? Apparently, he was talking to himself, loudly, about wine fraud and people following him. I tried to sound concerned. That doesn't sound good. No, it doesn't. Mr. Marin, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you know anything about Mr. Halloway's current difficulties? Detective, I've been home all night. My security system can verify that. Which was technically true. I had been home. I just hadn't mentioned that my security system was portable. Be careful, Mr. Marin. This situation is escalating, and I'd hate to see anyone get hurt. After I hung up, I sat in my office and reviewed the footage from the motel. Darren looked like a man on the edge of a complete breakdown. His hair was disheveled, his clothes were wrinkled, and his eyes had the wild look of someone who hadn't slept in days. Mission accomplished. My phone rang. Kiera. Pierce, you have to stop this. Stop what? Whatever you're doing to Darren. He called me this morning, completely incoherent. He thinks people are following him, that his room is bugged, that someone's trying to drive him insane. Sounds like guilt and paranoia. Common side effects of fraud and adultery. This isn't funny. He's talking about leaving town, maybe leaving the country. Good. Maybe he'll take you with him. Pierce. I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside, it was starting to rain again, the kind of steady drizzle that made Portland famous. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the water run down the glass and thinking about how much my life had changed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, I'd been a cuckolded husband with a boring job and a failing marriage. Now I was something else entirely, something harder, something that fought back. I liked the change. My laptop chimed with an email notification. The sender was listed as a friend, but I recognized Jess's writing style immediately. Pierce, thought you should know that Darren cleaned out our joint accounts this morning. About $50,000 in cash. He's planning to run. Also, Kiera's been calling me, begging for help. Apparently her business is completely finished and she's facing lawsuits from several investors. Thought you'd want to know. Jay. $50,000 in cash. That was a lot of running money, enough to disappear for months or even years. But it was also evidence of desperation, and desperate people make mistakes. I opened my security software and started planning for what I was beginning to think of as the final act. If Darren wanted to run, I was going to make sure he had a very good reason to keep running, and I was going to make sure everyone knew why. The storm hit Portland like a freight train loaded with bad intentions. Wind howled through the trees, rain hammered against windows, and the power grid flickered like a candle in a hurricane. It was the kind of weather that made smart people stay inside and desperate people make terrible decisions. Darren Halloway was about to prove he wasn't smart people. I was in my office, monitoring the security feeds and waiting for the inevitable, when my motion detectors started screaming. Not the gentle chime that meant a neighbor's cat was wandering through my yard. The full-throated alarm that meant someone was trying to break into my house. Through the cameras, I could see 2 figures in dark rain gear working on my back door. One was tall and lean, definitely Darren. The other was smaller, moving with the kind of nervous energy that screamed amateur. Kiera. They'd decided to team up for one last desperate play. How romantic. I activated my home's lockdown protocol, a system I'd designed but never thought I'd actually use. Steel shutters dropped over the windows, magnetic locks engaged on every door, and the house's smart lighting system began cycling through a pattern that would make anyone inside feel like they were trapped in a disco from hell. Then I called Riley. They're here, I said. Both of them? Both of them. Back door, trying to pick the lock. I'm 5 minutes out. Try not to have all the fun without me. Through my security cameras, I watched Kiera and Darren realize they'd walked into a trap. The back door had opened easily, too easily, and now they were standing in my kitchen, looking around at the steel shutters and flashing lights like mice who'd just discovered the cheese was attached to a spring-loaded bar. Pierce, Kiera called out, we know you're here. We just want to talk. I activated the intercom system, broadcasting my voice throughout the house. Talk? That's interesting. Most people don't break into houses when they want to talk. You've destroyed our lives, Darren said, his voice cracking with stress and exhaustion. We've lost everything because of your little revenge fantasy. Correction, I replied. You've lost everything because you're thieves and liars. I just documented it. They moved through the house like burglars, which technically they were. Darren carried a laptop bag that probably contained whatever evidence they thought they could use against me. Kiera had a small suitcase, probably packed for a quick getaway. The front door's locked, Kiera said, rattling the handle. So are the windows, Darren replied, examining the steel shutters. This place is like a fortress. It's a smart home, I said through the intercom. Emphasis on smart, unlike its current occupants. They made their way toward my office, following the sound of my voice like moths drawn to a flame. I let them come. The office was where I wanted them, surrounded by computers, cameras, and enough electronic evidence to bury them both. Pierce, Kiera said as they reached the office door. Please, we can work this out. Can we? How exactly do you propose to work out fraud, theft, adultery, and breaking and entering? We'll give back the money, Darren said. All of it, and we'll leave town. You'll never see us again. Tempting, I said, but I think I prefer my original plan. That's when Riley arrived. I heard his car in the driveway, then the sound of the front door opening. He had override codes for my security system. Heavy footsteps in the hallway, moving with the confidence of someone who belonged here. Evening, folks, Riley's voice boomed through the house. Beautiful night for a home invasion. Kiera and Darren spun around, realizing they were now trapped between Riley and my locked office door. The flashing lights cast weird shadows on their faces, making them look like characters in a horror movie, which I suppose they were. Who are you? Darren demanded. I'm the guy who's been documenting your complete breakdown for the past week, Riley replied. Nice job with the motel room paranoia, by the way. Very entertaining. Darren's face went white. That was you? That was us, I said through the intercom. Amazing what you can accomplish with the right technology and a complete lack of sympathy for wine thieves. I opened the office door and stepped out, finally facing them in person. They looked terrible, exhausted, desperate, and completely out of options. Darren's expensive suit was wrinkled and stained. Kiera's usually perfect hair hung limp around her face. You look like hell, I said. Pierce, please, Kiera started. Save it, I interrupted. I've heard enough of your explanations to last several lifetimes. I pulled out my phone and opened the livestream app I'd set up earlier. With the press of a button, everything happening in my house was now being broadcast live to social media, complete with audio and multiple camera angles. What are you doing? Darren asked. Giving the people what they want, I replied. Entertainment, drama, justice, the complete and final destruction of two people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. Riley positioned himself between them and the only exit, arms crossed and looking like a bouncer at the world's most exclusive club. Here's what's going to happen, I said, addressing the camera as much as them. You're going to confess. Everything. The affair, the wine fraud, the insurance scam, the break-in tonight, all of it, on camera, for everyone to see. We're not confessing anything, Darren said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, you are, because if you don't, I'm calling the police and pressing charges for breaking and entering, theft, fraud, and conspiracy. With the evidence I've collected, you'll both be looking at serious jail time. You can't prove anything, Kiera said. I laughed and gestured around the room. Kiera, honey, I've got video of you stealing my wine, audio of you planning insurance fraud, footage of you breaking into my house tonight, and about 50 witnesses watching this live stream right now. I held up my phone, showing them the viewer count climbing rapidly. Word was spreading fast through social media. People loved watching rich criminals get their comeuppance. So here's the deal, I continued. Confess everything on camera, and I'll let you walk away. No police, no charges, just complete and total public humiliation. Refuse, and I'll destroy you through the legal system instead. Darren looked at Kiera, who looked at Riley, who looked like he was enjoying himself immensely. Tick-tock, I said. Kiera broke first. Fine. What do you want us to say? The truth. Start with the affair. She looked directly into the camera, her face a mask of defeated resignation. My name is Kiera Marin, and I've been having an affair with Darren Halloway for 6 months. Keep going. We used my husband's wine collection to create counterfeit bottles, which we sold to investors for approximately $50,000. And we planned to frame Pierce for insurance fraud so we could collect on his wine collection and start a new life together. Darren's turn. He stared at the camera like it was a firing squad, which, in a way, it was. I'm Darren Halloway. I've been defrauding my investors and my import company for over a year. I used Kiera's access to authentic vintage wines to create convincing counterfeits. Don't forget the part about calling me boring, I said. His face flushed red. I said cruel things about Pierce, things that weren't true. He didn't deserve any of this. And tonight? Tonight we broke into his house to steal evidence and try to blackmail him into silence. I looked at the phone. The viewer count had climbed past 500 and was still rising. Comments were pouring in, mostly people expressing shock, outrage, and a fair amount of dark amusement at the spectacle. There you have it, folks, I said to the camera. Look, a complete confession from two people who thought they were smarter than the system. Let this be a lesson. In the age of smartphones and social media, there's no such thing as a perfect crime. I ended the live stream and pocketed my phone. You can go now. That's it? Kiera asked. That's it. You're finished in this town, probably in this state, and definitely in the wine industry. Your reputations are destroyed, your careers are over, and everyone you know has just watched you confess to multiple felonies. I'd say my work here is done. They stumbled toward the exit like survivors of a natural disaster, which, in a way, they were. Riley stepped aside to let them pass, but not before offering some parting advice. If I were you, he said, I'd start driving and not stop until I hit a state that doesn't have extradition treaties. After they left, I deactivated the security lockdown and opened the steel shutters. The storm was beginning to pass, leaving behind the clean smell of rain-washed air and the satisfaction of a job well done. Feel better now? Riley asked. I considered the question as I watched their car disappear into the night. Did I feel better? Vindicated, certainly. Satisfied that justice had been served. But better? Ask me tomorrow, I said. But I already knew the answer. I felt like myself again, maybe for the first time in years. Not the boring husband who fixed Wi-Fi and programmed thermostats, not the victim of other people's schemes and betrayals. I felt like Pierce Marin, the man who fought back, and that felt pretty good indeed. Outside, lightning flashed one last time, illuminating the empty street where my enemies had fled into the darkness. I stood on my porch, soaked in rain and satisfaction, watching their taillights disappear around the corner. The neighbors who had gathered to watch the spectacle began to disperse, many of them calling out congratulations and support. Mrs. Henderson from next door actually applauded. That's what you get for underestimating the IT guy, I said to the empty street. Thunder rolled in the distance, but the storm was moving on, just like Kiera and Darren, just like the old Pierce Marin who would have let them walk all over him. I went inside, locked the door, and started planning for tomorrow. There was a lot to do. Insurance claims to file, lawyers to call, and a daughter to pick up from her friend's house. But for now, I was content to sit in my office, surrounded by the technology that had helped me reclaim my life, and savor the sweet taste of revenge served cold. Well, not cold exactly, more like perfectly chilled, like a good vintage wine, the kind that wasn't fake,